Well, Kate, it is fantastic to see you. Thank you for coming to St. Dee's in Parsons Green, all the way from Duke in the United States of America. It's lovely to have you with us. I didn't tell you this when we were just talking just now, but when I put this in that it's going to be on Zoom, it said on my Apple Diary or calendar thing, booked us in for a safari park near Turin in Italy because apparently there's a Zoom safari park. So next time when you and I get together, let's go to the safari park in Italy.
Man, you're raising my standards. Take me away.
Okay, I've told them a bit about you, but you must tell them a bit about yourself. So, Kate, tell who are they talking to? Tell them a bit about Kate.
Well, I've just been taken hostage here in this warehouse. Please blink twice, if you can save me. I'm a historian at Duke University. I've been here for I think 20 years, teaching cultural history at the Divinity School, which is my very favorite because they're both either going to be professors or going to the pastorate or nonprofit work in some way. So it's a wonderful kind of challenging position where you have to actually care about the implications of whatever it is you're monologuing about. I also have a center called Everything Happens, which is based on a little play on like instead of everything happens for a reason, how do we live with the truth? How do we get truths that bear up our lives now that we know that everything happens?
Well, and I'm going to make sure, Kate, that we do a massive advert for the podcast. You're going to get a whole bunch of new subscribers. So Kate has a fantastic Everything Happens podcast, which is hugely well watched and listened to in the US, but all over the world. And everyone at St. D's should be listening to that on a regular basis. Kate, but I mean, tell us, so a theologian and a kind of religious historian, and yet now much of your work is about the kind of global health and well-being industry. I mean, that seems like a strange place to end up, maybe more interesting than, some kind of library somewhere, but how do you end up kind of in this kind of area of interest as someone who's doing theology?
I was just a very angry Canadian 18-year-old who, well, the truth is, I grew up Mennonite, which is a tradition obsessed with simplicity and building furniture that no one asked you to build and ruining buffet tables with Jello. And as a very kind of ostensibly humble people, I thought it was very shocking when I discovered that many of my family and friends were attending an enormous church on the outskirts of town that was devoted to this story of health, wealth, and happiness. And I thought, no, that is for Americans. And I was was very emphatic on that point. And so very early on, I became so historically and by extensions or theologically obsessed with what is it about all of us that craves a message of spiritual certainty. And why is this not simply just a Christian heresy, but a deeply appealing new way of grappling with modernity? And so what began as a history of the prosperity gospel became a history of self-help and the wellness industry. So that has powered my research life for about, I don't know, 18 years now. But it also means I got to travel. I ruined my 20s traveling around Canada and the United States interviewing televangelists for the most part.
Well, that we'll hear next time you're in London. Come and tell us about that one. So obviously we're doing this series all about kind of spiritual health and well-being. The beginning of the year, we've got kind of Blue Monday just a few weeks away. We're thinking about how we make our life more sustainable. Most of us, actually, in some ways, faith is making our life less sustainable because we've now got a family and we've got a job and a career and we've got to now change the world by next Tuesday. Oh, and by the way, we need to be on the road for the welcome team at church and in a life group and all the rest of it. So we're trying to think about it at St. Dionis. How do we do life well this year, and how do we live well, and how do we kind of not only just maintain some sense of well-being but build our sense of well-being? And we're in a world where people are just throwing stuff at us day and night, whether we have to buy it or log on to it or subscribe to it, which is all there to make our life better. So when you look at the kind of self-help, kind of well-being industry, which is worth billions of dollars around the world, what are they getting wrong? What are the things where you just think this is just disastrous and we need to not go there? Because it seems to me that even having services on well-being at church risks that we do go there. So tell these people what they shouldn't do and what's wrong with this stuff.
Oh, sure. Well, you shouldn't be more and more American. And I mean this in a very specific way. American culture is obsessed with hyper agency, this overinflated sense that everything is possible. And in fact, if you don't say the words, everything is possible all the time, they really worry that we fall then into nothing is possibilism and that you will set people up for diseases of despair, like depression or different kinds of anxiety. And I think there's a real worry, and especially at this time of year, when we want to find that space of limited agency of what is possible today, that we accidentally, all of us around the world, Canadians and people from the UK, like accidentally overabsorb too much American everything is possibilism. Because everything is possibilism feels really addictive. It gives us the experience of choice, of imagining ourselves as just right acting individuals who, frankly, God then looks down on and is like the one with whom he is well pleased. And we feel that way when we find ourselves reaching. But if we overreach, if we tell ourselves a story that is accidentally too exaggerated, we set ourselves up for disappointment, but also of just a mistaken account of self. Like, well, then why is it that I'm so tired? Why is it that I crave rest or solitude? And it's frankly just because everything is possibilism is neither physically nor morally sustainable.
Now, and you've obviously you've come to this journey through your kind of study and your teaching and your writing and your amazing podcast that everyone's signing up to, but you've also come to it through your own personal journey. And so I guess that you learn in real terms that, that everything possible thing is just that really doesn't work through
Yeah.
your own story. So would you share a bit about that?
Sure. I'd like to tell you that I am exempt from, especially growing up Mennonite or Canadian or all the things that are supposed to tilt me toward gently lower middle class. Don't worry about me. I don't feel like I deserve my future. I I found that in my own life that the more I tried, the more I accidentally began to believe that I deserve my life, that I'm earning my life, that life is a ladder and that I'm climbing. And I think, and part of this is just sort of a natural, just like a lamp produces not just light, but heat.
Hmm.
I think sometimes when we really try, we accidentally overabsorb a message that we have to then deserve and earn our life. And I mean, by the time I hit my mid 30s, I was just on this super achiever, over ambitious, try to earn everything train that set me up for um, a very difficult spiritual place when I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. It was a very sudden diagnosis. There was no cancer in my family. I went from being somebody who had a very exciting trajectory in my life to someone who had to imagine that the next 6 to 9 months were my last. And I think the two very intense feelings I had when I couldn't fix my life, master my life, were, I mean, one, anger. If I'm being very honest, it was, God, to be honest, wasn't I kind of okay? Like, wasn't I sort of good? Didn't I deserve better than this absolute tar pit that I've been given? But the other was, and I struggle with this every time I cannot fix my own life, is just shame. Like, there are so many of us where we take and cannot give. We we need more than we can possibly reciprocate. And it creates this real sense that, like, it's not just that a bad thing happens to us or we have to manage that life is hard, but that we are the bad thing. And so I have found that part of what the really difficult part of everything as possibilism does to us is when we can't live into that story, we feel kicked out of this narrative, then we experience not just the sense that we have failed, but that we are a failure.
And I mean, firstly, tell us how you are now, because we'd like to hear that part of the story. But also, I guess what you discover in that is that the Christian story, the Christian tradition, let's put it simply, the gospel
Yeah.
offers something different. It offers something that's an alternative, that's deeper, that's richer, that's more infinite, more eternal, So how are you now?
Yeah.
And actually looking at that now, what does the gospel offer that actually that health and well-being kind of industry doesn't?
Yeah. Well, I'm 9 years away from that diagnosis. I have survived incredible odds. It's been and it's been a really long, hard road. I don't have nearly as much cancer as I did before. And I still struggle with a lot of the after effects of chronic illness. And so it's one of those kind of lessons you have to keep learning, which is that when you can't when you can't solve your life, fix your life, go back to the before Instagram version where you can at least like master ease, then what truths do you need to hold up a life like that? And I have found that the I mean, the beautiful part about the gospel's good word is that we are so deeply and overwhelmingly loved by God in the midst of our pain and our nothingness, not waiting for us to then go back to the super achieving Christian helper, great during the passing of the peace section. That even like it lets us even skip out on a lot of the worst performative parts of Sunday morning, is we don't really actually have to be good enough for God. We won't really, and I think this is part of the tricky part about the overwhelming culture of, I find that most, especially secular cultures, and we're putting secular in quotation marks because they really have religious beliefs, is they're not usually they might not say they have a prosperity gospel, but they usually have an optimization culture where everybody's trying to get a little bit better. And right now, like if you're a woman on Instagram, which of course you know the great depths of being sold supplements, skincare. I mean, there's just endless ways in which you're supposed to perform good, better, best. And it's funny, when I told you I used to study televangelists. And when I told people before, they used to say like, oh, how sad, like what hucksters, everybody going on there trying to sell something. And then social media was invented. And now everybody's just like a televangelist of good, better, best. Everybody's giving the Christmas card version of their life. So I think part of what I've learned on the other side of illness is that God does not want our performance of perfection. We are made fragile. We're made uncertain. All the parts that we think are a glitch are actually a part of the fabric of mortality. And so there's no shame in being as limited as we are. But we are asked to step into the goodness that God gives us that all of the optimization culture can't.
That is beautiful. I'm intrigued to know, um, what do you do differently now? What is on the other side of that realization? I mean, because we can't kind of, we can't kind of zone out of it. We can't, as you say, stop this stuff coming at us from all angles. We can't stop living in a culture where people continually feel this desire to kind of to kind of over succeed, to over accept, to and to overcompensate. So how what difference does it make to the way you live your life now?
Oh, I write about this and I think about it because I openly struggle with it. I mean, I think that's the really fun part about heresy, right? Or just idolatry of any kind, is it's not like 180 degrees away from who we were. It's just a quarter turn away. And so the quarter turn away of the person that I should be is the one who feels that anxious, hummy, buzzy, why aren't I better? Why haven't I fixed this by now? And the more authentic gospel version would say that I am living into the purpose God gives us as believers, which is that we know that we were made good, that we are made profoundly for love, that frankly, life is so much harder than we thought it would be, and therefore we require courage. And if we feel fear, it's because we're realistic. And so almost all my book titles are like me struggling with the fact that I am a self-help monster. It's like no cure for being human, good enough. Like these are all book titles in which I'm like, it's okay. But I think it's a daily, weekly course correction, that there's always the shinier version, but but we don't always know when it's helping us step into agency and when it's steering us into the rocks.
I was listening to a young Muslim leader who had been on an internship program run by a Christian organization last year. That's a long story I won't go into. And he was explaining what he had got from being with these Christians for 1 year. And he said, I think I've understood that the core thing about being a Christian is that you have to hear God say, as your father, this is my child, whom I love. With you I am well pleased. And I sat there thinking, most of us as Christians almost never get to that point where we realize that's what it's about. It's not about, all the stuff that we do. It's about just recognizing that God is in heaven looking down and saying, this is my child, whom I love. With them, I'm well pleased. And it feels to me that it takes us a very long time to get where that Muslim had just observed in just a kind of 12 months. Give us
Yeah.
any tips you've got, because obviously, as you say, you struggle with this stuff, but presumably also there's been some kind of victories along with some of the not so good days. So tell us, what would you say to the good people of St Dionis Parsons Green, to say, as you set out on 2025, here's one or two things just to kind of to keep hold of.
Well, I guess maybe some of the practices that we all need to practice is just how strange it feels to ask for help, to tie us back into each other. Interdependence is like such a beautiful goal, and yet practically speaking, it's really hard to do. We feel embarrassed when we need things. We also just don't want to be that person. Also, we find ourselves holding on to a story frequently that is an old story that is still important to us, and we just didn't feel fully heard, but we feel a little bit too embarrassed to say it the 15th time and be like, no, really, I actually just need to get this out. So I would say practice reaching out to a friend this week and then again next week to create a little bit of like follow through. If you actually do need something, people want to hear from you so much more than you think they do. And I would say, like, don't be afraid to take it the extra level to go back to a story that is usually a pain that we've been holding on to a little bit too long alone. I mean, one of the great lies of pain is that nobody cares and that nobody will understand. And so the only cure for that is connection. But of course, connection feels awkward and it makes us feel dumb, which is why we don't do it. So just trying to get over a few of the barriers of feeling embarrassed, I think will help tie us back into like the very natural feeling of our own humanity and remind us because someone told us that we are good.
And just one last question, which is slightly random, but it seems like a nice place to end. I mean, other than meeting me at Zoom in Turin, the safari park at some point later in the
Like
year,
that very much.
And other than obviously all of the St. Dionis crew signing up for your various podcasts and books, what are you looking forward to? What is going to bring you life and joy and well-being in 2025, Kate Bowler?
Oh, well, I do something very dumb and very random. But when I am too caught up in like the grind of performing or just of work or anything, I always sign up to do something completely ridiculous. And this is actually something that Tom Holland and I have in common is we will, so sometimes you'll find it on an app, but if you feel like your life is too settled in a way that does not bring you joy, find the nearest random dumb thing to go visit. I have visited the world's largest and shortest something something lighthouse, the world's largest pair of legs, the world's largest ball of twine. I will go see painted door knobs that don't, I mean, the dumber it is, the more it reminds me that the surprise and the absurdity of life is as worth my attention as the chips I plan on buying after this.
That's super, Kate. I do. I want to say thank you. Thank you for sparing some time for the good
Right.
people of St. Dionis, because we really appreciate it. Also, thank you. We've known each other just for a couple of years. You are utterly inspiring. You made me cry the other day on a run because I was listening to your podcast, and I was actually listening to you interview Sam Wells, who's speaking in a few weeks' time at St. Dionis, and I found myself running along in the cold, bawling my eyes out. So thank you for that, and just thank you for all that you are doing to help people all around the world to think about how they can do life a bit more deeply and do some weird things like go and look at doorknobs and other stuff like that. That's
Right.
fantastic. That's a great
Oh,
contribution.
well, three cheers for a beautiful congregation and three cheers for mediocrity. Maybe we experience it this year.
It's been great to speak to you. And next time, come and see us in Parsons Green.
Yeah, I insist.
That's it.